Have you ever stood in the presence of someone and felt utterly invisible, as though your worth had vanished in their eyes? That sting of being undervalued is an experience so many of us can relate to, yet we often brush it aside, internalize it, or worse, let it define us. In Buddhist teachings, this pain, while sharp, holds an invaluable lesson. Your worth is not defined by others, it is recognized within yourself. This is a story of self-discovery, of how one seeker reclaimed their value and found inner peace. Through their journey, we will explore profound lessons rooted in Zen philosophy, highlighting the power of detachment, self-respect, and inner strength. Let's embark on this journey together, where each step brings us closer to understanding the art of valuing ourselves. The pain of rejection. Once, in a tranquil village nestled amid nature's beauty, lived a humble seeker. They had dedicated their life to serving others, offering wisdom, time, and kindness without expecting much in return. People sought their guidance, praised their compassion, and relied on their steady presence. Yet, over time, something shifted. The same people who once turned to the seeker began to take their kindness for granted. Requests for help turned into demands. Conversations became one-sided. Eventually, the seeker realized their presence had faded into the background, unnoticed and unappreciated. Confused and heartbroken, the seeker approached their Zen teacher. "Master," they asked, "why do I feel so invisible despite giving so much of myself to others?" The master, a person of calm wisdom, listened patiently before posing a question. "If you pour water into a cup that is already full, what happens?" "It overflows," the seeker replied. "Exactly," the master said. "You have poured your energy into spaces that no longer have room for it. It is time to reclaim that energy and redirect it wisely." The parable of the forgotten pearl. To illustrate this lesson, the master shared a story. Once, a pearl of unmatched beauty was discovered. Its clarity and brilliance captivated everyone who saw it. But as time passed, the pearl changed hands, and its value was forgotten. It was treated as just another stone, discarded and ignored. Did the pearl lose its worth? Or did people lose their ability to see its brilliance? The seeker sat in silence, absorbing the metaphor. Slowly, they began to understand. Their worth had never diminished. Instead, they had been offering their value to those who no longer had the eyes to appreciate it. This realization marked the beginning of the seeker's journey toward reclaiming self-respect and detachment. The power of silence and distance. The master then gave the seeker a simple yet profound piece of advice. Do not argue. Do not plead. Do not seek explanations. Instead, step back in silence. Observe without anger. Detach without resentment. Let your absence speak louder than your presence. Following this guidance, the seeker began to withdraw from those who had dismissed them. They stopped offering unsolicited help and ceased initiating conversations. Instead, they turned their focus inward, nurturing their own growth and well-being. First, this change baffled those around them. They questioned the seeker's sudden silence and absence, but as time passed, a quiet realization began to dawn. Tasks that had once been effortlessly handled by the seeker now felt burdensome. The wisdom and kindness they had taken for granted were suddenly missed. This shift was not about revenge or validation. It was about balance. As the master had taught, absence creates space for appreciation. Only when something is lost do many realize its true value. Cultivating inner strength. During this period of detachment, the seeker turned inward. They practiced meditation and mindfulness, allowing themselves to sit with their emotions without judgment. The master introduced them to the concept of anatta, or non-self, a core teaching in Buddhist philosophy. Attachment to external validation, the master explained, creates unnecessary suffering. Letting go of the need for approval frees us from this cycle of pain. The seeker adopted a simple mantra: I am enough, not because others say so, but because I exist. Gradually, the heavy burden of rejection lifted. In its place grew a sense of unshakable self-worth, independent of external circumstances. Imagine a scenario where a friend constantly disregards your time and effort. You send thoughtful messages, make plans, and offer support. only to receive indifference in return. At what point do you step back and ask, am I pouring my energy into a full cup? Or consider the workplace. Have you ever gone above and beyond, only for your contributions to go unnoticed? It's easy to fall into the trap of overextending yourself in hopes of recognition. Yet, as the seeker learned, true self-respect lies in knowing when to step back and redirect your energy. Absence as a teacher. As weeks turned into months, the people who had undervalued the seeker began to reflect on their own behavior. Some approached with genuine apologies, while others remained distant, bound by their egos. The master reminded the seeker, not everyone will acknowledge your worth, even after you withdraw. This is not your burden to bear. What matters is that you have reclaimed your peace and self-respect. For those who returned with sincerity, the seeker offered forgiveness, but with newfound clarity. They established boundaries to ensure their worth would never be overlooked again. For those who did not return, the seeker let them go without bitterness, embracing the impermanence of relationships. If this resonates with you, take a moment to reflect. Where in your life have you been pouring your energy into a full cup? How can you redirect that energy towards spaces and people who truly appreciate it? And if you're enjoying this journey of self-discovery, consider subscribing to Buddhism in Modern Life. Together, we can explore more ways to bring Buddhist wisdom into our everyday lives. When we left off in Part 1, the seeker had embarked on their journey of self-discovery, learning to detach with compassion and embrace the impermanence of relationships. This chapter delves deeper into how they nurtured their inner resilience and transformed their life, not only for themselves but also for those around them. The shift from seeking validation to embracing inner growth. As the seeker practiced mindfulness and detachment, they realized something profound. Much of their pain stemmed from a deep-seated desire for external validation. This isn't uncommon. Many of us, knowingly or unknowingly, tie our worth to how others perceive us. We look to friends, family, or even strangers to tell us we're valuable. But what happens when that validation is withheld, or, worse, when it turns into rejection? The seeker's teacher once said, "A tree does not ask the wind to appreciate its shade. It simply grows, providing shelter to those who seek it." Inspired by this metaphor, the seeker began a transformative practice of focusing inward. Instead of seeking external affirmation, they started cultivating qualities that strengthened their self-esteem from within. One of the most pivotal practices they adopted was gratitude. The seeker made it a daily habit to reflect on things they were grateful for. Not just external factors like a sunny day or a kind word, but also their own qualities, such as their patience, compassion, and strength. This small but consistent practice helped them to recognize and celebrate their own worth, independent of external acknowledgement. For instance, instead of lamenting how others had taken their kindness for granted, the seeker reframed their perspective. "I am grateful for my capacity to give, regardless of whether others notice. My generosity is a reflection of who I am, not of how others treat me." This mindset shift wasn't instantaneous. Like the roots of a tree growing deep into the soil, it took time, patience, and consistent effort. The role of boundaries in self-respect. One of the hardest lessons for the seeker to learn was the importance of boundaries. Growing up, they had been taught that selflessness was the ultimate virtue, and they often mistook boundary setting as selfishness. But their teacher gently corrected this misconception with an analogy. Imagine you have a well of clear, fresh water. People come to drink from it, and you give freely, happy to quench their thirst. But if you let everyone take as much as they want without limits, what happens? The well runs dry, the seeker replied. Exactly. Boundaries are not barriers, they are safeguards. They ensure you can continue to give without depleting yourself. With this newfound understanding, the seeker began setting healthy boundaries. They started small, declining invitations that felt more like obligations than genuine connections, politely but firmly saying no to tasks that overextended their energy and prioritizing time for self-care. At first, this change was met with resistance. Some people accused the seeker of being distant or selfish. Others tried to guilt them into reverting to their old ways. But the seeker remained steadfast, remembering the words of their teacher. Those who truly value you will respect your boundaries. Those who don't are revealing their own limitations, not yours. An example of this shift came when a close friend repeatedly asked for favors but rarely reciprocated. In the past, the seeker would have obliged out of a sense of obligation. But now, they responded differently. I'm happy to help you, but I also need time to take care of my own responsibilities. Let's find a way to balance this so it's fair for both of us. To the seeker's surprise, this approach didn't alienate the friend. Instead, it opened up an honest conversation about mutual respect and expectations, strengthening their bond. From rejection to renewal, the seeker's journey wasn't just a solitary experience. Along the way, they encountered others who had faced similar challenges and learned from their stories. One such story came from a farmer in the village who shared a parable about rejection and renewal. There was once a plot of land that lay barren for many years. Farmers came and went, planting seeds but abandoning them when they didn't sprout immediately. The land was deemed worthless, unable to yield anything of value. But one day, a patient farmer arrived. Instead of planting seeds right away, they spent time nourishing the soil, removing weeds, and adding compost. It took seasons of hard work, but eventually, the land blossomed, producing an abundant harvest. The lesson? Just because something doesn't yield results immediately doesn't mean it lacks potential. Sometimes, the conditions aren't right, but with care and patience, even the most overlooked land can become fruitful. Hearing this, the seeker realized that the rejection they had experienced wasn't a reflection of their worth, but of the circumstances and perspectives of others. Just like the land, their value remained constant, waiting for the right environment to flourish. The art of letting go. As the seeker continued their journey, they encountered a recurring challenge, the fear of letting go. Whether it was a relationship, a job, or a dream that no longer served them, the act of releasing felt like a loss. But their teacher introduced them to a different perspective. Letting go is not the same as giving up. It's making space for something new. Imagine holding a handful of sand. The tighter you grip it, the more it slips through your fingers. But if you open your hand, the sand stays. Letting go is about trusting that what is meant for you will remain, and what is not will fall away. The seeker applied this wisdom to their relationships. There was a particular friend who had been a source of constant negativity. While the seeker cared deeply for this person, they realized that maintaining the relationship was draining their energy. With compassion and clarity, the seeker decided to step back. They didn't end the friendship with bitterness or anger. Instead, they had an honest conversation. I value our connection, but I need to focus on my own growth right now. I hope you can understand. The friend didn't take the news well at first, but over time, they came to respect the seeker's decision. And in the space that was created by letting go, the seeker found new relationships that were more aligned with their values and energy. The ripple effect of self-worth. As the seeker's confidence and clarity grew, they noticed a remarkable change in their environment. People who once took them for granted began to treat them with greater respect. New opportunities seemed to appear effortlessly. It was as if the universe was responding to their inner transformation. Their teacher explained this phenomenon with a simple analogy. When you light a candle, its glow doesn't just illuminate the candle itself. It spreads light to the surrounding space. Your self-worth is like that candle. When you nurture it, its warmth and brightness naturally extend to others, inspiring them to do the same. One day, a young villager approached the seeker, asking for advice on dealing with rejection. The seeker shared their story, emphasizing the importance of valuing oneself first. But they also offered a practical exercise. Write down all the things you appreciate about yourself, no matter how small. Read this list every day, especially when you're feeling low. Over time, you'll start to internalize these truths, and they will become your foundation. The villager followed this advice, and months later, they returned to thank the seeker. Your guidance helped me see myself in a new light. I no longer feel defined by others' opinions. I feel free. The role of compassion in detachment. While detachment often sounds cold or indifferent, the seeker learned that it could coexist with compassion. Detachment wasn't about shutting people out or avoiding emotional connections. It was about recognizing when to let go for the sake of one's peace. The seeker demonstrated this when an old acquaintance who had once dismissed them reached out for help. Despite their past hurt, the seeker chose to assist, but with clear boundaries. I'm happy to help, but I need to ensure this doesn't compromise my own well-being. This balance of compassion and boundaries allowed the seeker to maintain their integrity while still offering kindness. By the end of this stage in their journey, the seeker had not only transformed their relationship with themselves, but also influenced those around them. Their story was far from over, however. The final part of this journey would explore how the seeker applied their newfound wisdom to create a life of lasting peace, fulfillment, and authentic connections. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll dive into how the seeker's lessons became a guiding light for others, and how embracing impermanence can lead to ultimate freedom. The seeker had come a long way. From grappling with rejection to cultivating inner strength, they now stood on the precipice of the final lesson, embracing impermanence and discovering true freedom. This wasn't just a personal transformation. It was the culmination of their journey to find peace, purpose, and connection. The nature of impermanence. One crisp autumn morning, as the seekers sat under a great oak tree, their teacher spoke softly. Look around you. The leaves are changing colors, some falling to the ground. Do you mourn their loss? The seekers shook their head. No, because I know it's part of the cycle. The tree will grow new leaves in spring. Exactly, the teacher smiled. Yet, when it comes to our lives, we cling to people, experiences, and even pain, fearing their loss. But impermanence isn't something to fear. It's what makes life precious. The fleeting nature of things gives them meaning. The teacher then posed a question that lingered with the seeker for days. What would your life look like if you embraced impermanence rather than resisted it? Letting go of the fear of loss. The seeker reflected deeply on this question. For years, their fear of losing relationships, possessions, or opportunities had driven many of their decisions. They clung tightly to what they had, even when it caused them suffering. To confront this fear, the seeker began a practice called mindful releasing. Each evening, they would sit quietly and reflect on one thing they were holding onto, whether it was a regret, a worry, or even an attachment to a specific outcome. They would visualize gently releasing it, like a leaf falling from a tree, and silently say, I let this go, trusting that what is meant for me will remain. At first, the practice felt unnatural. The seeker often found themselves picking the same thoughts back up the next day. But with time and patience, they noticed a subtle shift. They began to feel lighter, less burdened by what they couldn't control. This newfound ease became particularly evident during a major life event, the passing of their teacher, a lesson in graceful acceptance. One evening, the seeker was called to their teacher's side. The once vibrant mentor now lay frail but serene, their breaths shallow but steady. The time has come for me to move on, the teacher said with a peaceful smile. But remember, my presence was never in this body alone. It lives in the lessons I've shared, the growth you've achieved, and the love you've shown. The seeker felt a deep ache in their chest, but rather than resist, they allowed the emotions to flow. They held their teacher's hand and whispered, "Thank you for everything. I will carry your wisdom forward." When the teacher passed, the seeker grieved deeply but without despair. They understood now that nothing truly ends. It only changes form. The love they felt for their teacher wasn't confined to a physical presence. It was alive in their actions, thoughts, and the countless lives their teacher had touched. This experience solidified the seeker's understanding of impermanence. It wasn't about forgetting or moving on. It was about honoring what had been while making space for what was to come, creating a life of freedom. With this clarity, the seeker began to live in alignment with the principle of impermanence. They no longer clung to certainty or sought to control every outcome. Instead, they approached life with curiosity and trust, like a river flowing effortlessly toward the sea. One of the most profound changes was their relationship with time. The seeker stopped rushing through their days, chasing after future goals or lamenting past mistakes. Instead, they embraced the present moment fully, knowing it was all they truly had. For example, during a gathering with friends, the seeker noticed how often people were distracted, checking their phones, worrying about work, or reminiscing about the past. The seeker gently encouraged them to pause, saying, "Let's savor this moment together. It's a gift we'll never have again." This simple reminder often brought others into the present, deepening their connections and enriching their shared experiences. Spreading the light. The seeker's transformation didn't go unnoticed. People began to seek their guidance, drawn to their calm presence and insightful perspective. But rather than positioning themselves as a guru or expert, the seeker adopted the role of a fellow traveler, sharing what they had learned while honoring each person's unique path. They offered simple but powerful practices, such as the jar of impermanence, writing down things they were grateful for and placing them in a jar, serving as a reminder of life's fleeting beauty. A compassionate listening, fully hearing someone without interrupting or offering solutions, creating a space for genuine connection. The pause before reacting, taking a deep breath before responding to difficult situations, allowing wisdom to guide their actions instead of emotion. One of the most transformative moments came when a young child asked, "What happens when everything changes and nothing stays the same?" The seeker knelt to the child's level and said with a warm smile, "That's when the magic happens. Every change brings a new beginning. Imagine if the sun never set. We'd never see the stars." The child's eyes lit up with wonder, and the seeker felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Years later, the seeker returned to the oak tree where their journey had truly begun. Sitting beneath its wide branches, they reflected on how far they had come. They no longer feared rejection, loss, or change. Instead, they felt an abiding sense of peace, knowing they were part of a vast, ever-changing universe. As the wind rustled the leaves above, the seeker whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for the lessons learned and the love shared, for the pain endured and the joy discovered. I am grateful. May I continue to grow, to love, and to let go. In that moment, the seeker felt a profound sense of freedom, not the kind that comes from escaping life's challenges, but the kind that arises from embracing them with an open heart. The story of the seeker is not one of finality, but of infinite possibility. Their journey serves as a reminder that life is a series of beginnings and endings, each one an opportunity to grow, to love, and to find meaning. For those who feel lost or afraid, take heart. The path to freedom begins not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent steps towards self-awareness and compassion. Embrace impermanence, and you'll discover that the very changes you fear can become the gateways to your greatest growth. As the seeker learned, the only constant in life is change, and within that truth lies the secret to lasting peace.